Place, finding my place, my people, my future.
Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. If you're new here and you don't know me, I'm your host, Mary McSwain, and I am joined, as I normally often am, by my dad, Jay McSwain. And if you're a frequent visitor here, thank you so much for joining us again. And you know that we have been walking through the book that we came out with, I think at this point last spring. It's The Dark Sides of Personality and How to Overcome Them. And what we have been doing is going back and forth discussing the various chapters that we have in the book.
We're getting close to the end of this book.
We are. We've jumped through a lot of this book, and I want to assure y'all, if you're considering reading the book and you're listening to this podcast, or if you've already read the book and you're thinking that this is just going to be repetitive, one thing that I have picked up on in these conversations is that while we are touching on things that are in the book, elements and themes, we talk about a lot more than just what you'll find in the book. And
I would agree with that.
And I think that's one of the values that even we found in these conversations is that there's so much more insight when you really learn how to apply these principles to your own life. But today we are talking about one of the chapters in the book, and that is, how does my personality affect how I relate to other people? So, Dad, I'm going to ask you just at a very high level, how does your personality influence and affect how people relate with each other?
At a high level?
At a high level. We'll get down to the specifics in a little bit.
It has a lot to do whether you connect with a person, whether you rub people the wrong way, whether you disconnect with people, whether people turn you off. That's at a high level.
And I want to ask, we have discussed our definition of personality in other various episodes, but to tee up this conversation, to give us a context, how do we define personality here?
Okay. Personality is the inward and outward expression of emotional traits and characteristics that shape who we are, how we act, and what we do. I've been saying those words a long time, but that's what personality is.
You have, and there's one part of that definition that I want to touch on before we really get into the specifics of each personality, and that is that concept of the fact that personality is an inward and outward expression of who we are. How does that differentiate when we relate to people based off of who we are inwardly and who we are outwardly?
Mary, if we're wise, if we realize that the way we would project ourselves inwardly might not allow us to connect to someone outwardly, it helps us to understand how to sometimes temper those inward, the way we would relate. It helps us to sometimes realize maybe we need to enhance some things that aren't natural to us inwardly if we want to relate, or on the other side, if we don't want to not relate and not connect to other people. Because sometimes the way I am outwardly is not the way that I am inwardly. But my goal is to connect with people, and sometimes that means that I have to get out of what may be more natural to me and honestly sometimes enjoyable to me, but not enjoyable to other people.
Yes, and when relating is all about, to me, connecting with other people and understanding other people, and one of the ways that you can do that is by understanding yourself and connecting who you are with how you project who you are to other people. And like you were saying, sometimes who you are internally, how you perceive yourself, is not how other people are perceiving you. And perception has a great deal of influence on how you relate with other people, how you understand them, how they understand you. And that's one of the things we talk about all the time when it comes to personality, when it comes to overcoming the dark sides of your personality. Is one of the keys is having an awareness of who you are and who other people are, what your weaknesses are. And maybe one of your weaknesses is not being aware of how you're perceived by other people, and having an awareness of that, how you come across to other people, how you relate to other people naturally, and how they relate back to you, is one of the ways that you can better relate, connect, and understand other people.
Yeah.
So, what I want to ask you is some examples in your own life of when a dark side of your personality was exposed when you were relating to other people or even relating to yourself. Just give us an example in your own life to start us off.
I think that a lot of times, and I'm going to do this just generically, not a specific example. I know we could talk about where I did this well, as we've talked and laughed about with your mom about a year ago about building a house. But how I relate to a lot of people that I've realized through the years has not been so great is that if you don't get what I'm saying or you don't agree with what I'm saying, I find that my personality somewhat becomes forceful and almost like pushing on the other person. And if I'm trying to get the person from here to here, what happens a lot of times is they end up here. And I've realized that I have to temper, so sometimes being opinionated, sometimes being confident is a great quality, but not when you push it on other people, that you want them to see it the way you see it.
And that is a way that a lot of times what we say around here is that any strength taken to an extreme can become a weakness. Confidence is a great strength, but taken to an extreme, or even confidence, being driven, being decisive, that taken to an extreme can become arrogant and domineering. And so that would be a way that your strength taken to an extreme can hurt you when you're trying to relate to other people. And that's even one of the ways that we define what a dark side of your personality is. It's a tendency or a weakness that at times can hurt your witness, or in this case, hurt how you relate to other people, because it's turning them off more than it's drawing them in. When that strength of yours left unchecked, left unguarded, outside of being in step with the Holy Spirit, is taken to an extreme, and it turns into a dark side of your personality, and it exposes that dark side, and it hurts how you relate to other people.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to ask if you could give us an example of how knowing who you are or knowing who other people are actually helped you relate to them.
I'll give a great example. I think I've shared in the podcast before that I realized several years ago that when I would be promoting place in the foyer of our church, that I would be so aggressive that it would be like, oh, I just, like, I'm sorry, I just wanted a brochure. And where it helps me now is especially if I see people walk up to me and they want more information about how to get connected in our church to go through something like Place. I'm pretty good, especially if they're timid, at realizing talk slow, don't get up in their face, kind of body language needs to be back a little bit more. And that has helped me, I feel like, a lot to be able to not push people away. And even like I teach Place a lot at our church. When people come in, if I sense that they're more analytical, again, don't talk so fast. Ask questions a lot, because that's the way C personalities learn, is by asking questions. If they're an I personality, then smile a lot, make a little joke if you can think of a joke here and there, because that relates to them, because that's the way their personality generally relates to other people. So does that answer a little bit?
It does, because you even spoke not just about knowing who you are and how you relate to other people, how you come across to them, but also knowing the tendencies of some other personalities.
Yeah.
And how to relate best with them, not by not being who you are, but meeting them where they are and who they are. And I think that's one of the valuable things. And even one of the things, as you were saying that I was listening and picking up on, is that meeting people where they are is not about not being who you are, but it's about being empathetic towards who they are. And
that's good.
When you're taking your personality to an extreme and you're trying to temper, the word you use, temper or tone down, you're finding more balance. You're not being who you are. As a D personality, you still have confidence, even though you're toning down some of your intensity. But instead of being domineering or overly intense. Rather, it comes across as maybe passionate or endearing or focused or determined.
Yeah.
But it's important, I think, to remember as we're listening to this, that relating to other people and tempering some of those extremes, some of those dark sides of your personality, it's not about changing who you are, but tempering and balancing out some of your extremes. But it's also about being empathetic to who other people are and meeting people where they are.
Yeah. I want to share something in the notes, and maybe I'm jumping around a little bit, but of all the notes that you gave me to prepare for this podcast, one of the things that I realized is that D personalities, they are one of the most talkative of the 4 personality types. They talk a lot. But here's what I also realized. If you're relating to another D, they don't want you to use a lot of words. That they may talk a lot. I'm a D, I talk a lot. But when I'm talking to another D, they don't want me to use a lot of words. They want me to get to the point.
Interesting.
It is interesting. And I noticed that, like, S personalities, they keep going back and saying the same thing and using but and never being able to end it. And most Ds are getting so frustrated, like, can't you ever get to the point? Now, as a D, I don't know if your mom's going to be watching this, but sometimes she'll do that with me. I hope she's not watching. But I've learned not to push her and say, get to the point on this. Because if I do that, let's just say it's not a good few days. So what my natural way of relating to someone is to say, get to the point. But if I realize that someone like your mom, who is an S, she likes to keep circling the point, then if I want to relate to her, then I got to let her keep circling.
Okay, speaking of mom, let's talk about an example in y'all's marriage when you did relate to each other well, because you knew who you were and you knew who she was. Talk about that example that you mentioned earlier that you didn't get into.
So it was about a year ago. We were looking at building a house out where our family has a bunch of property, and we got into talking about where we would place the house. And everyone in the family that had the decision, they were going to give us the premier place on the whole property, according to them. And Mom didn't think it was the right place, and I could tell she was dug in. And the way I would have been years gone by before I had this great understanding of how to relate to other people, I would have been forceful. I would have been very, very intense. I would not have given up. D's don't give up, right? I would have not given up. And it would have ended up in a huge argument. I mean, huge argument. But I realized that we didn't agree. And I thought to myself, I'm relating to my wife, your mom. What's more important, to have harmony in our marriage, or to place a house that is going to not just be, I'll get over this, because you can't move the house once you built it. So I tempered myself down. I didn't force my opinion, and I wasn't direct and intimidating, and we made it through.
So glad that y'all did.
Yes, I am too.
Now, we've talked a lot. You're a D personality. And for those of y'all who may not be familiar, we use the DISC model here. It's DISC. Those are the 4 personality styles. And that's when we're referencing these letters, that's what we're talking about. We've talked a lot.
Do you want me to go through real quickly and just give a word or two about each one of the DISC?
Let's do that.
So the D is very decisive, very direct, very driven, very confident. They like to be in charge. Oftentimes they take charge whether or not you give them charge. The I is inspiring, influencing, very charismatic, very dynamic, loves the moment. People are drawn toward them. The S is sensitive, steady, very loyal. They're mediators. They want everyone to feel that they belong. And the C, which is your personality, very concise, very consistent, very perfectionist. They want all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. So that's a little bit of the 4 personality types.
If y'all can't tell, he's been doing this for a while. He's very well versed in being able to describe them. It just rolls off the tongue.
It is not my first time to say those words.
It is definitely not. And I feel...
And probably won't be my last time, right?
No, I hope not.
Me too.
So we've talked a little bit about what it's like as a D personality to relate with other people, how it comes from your perspective, how you feel like you relate, and how other people might perceive how you relate with them. Let's talk a little bit more about how the I personality relates. What are some of the difficulties, and how do they just naturally tend to relate with other people?
They relate in a real relaxed way, a real engaging way, because they're the dynamic, charismatic personality. Do you want me to go to the dark side of that?
Let's do that.
Okay, I'll give you a great example. Let's say that you've just lost someone. They've passed away. And we all know that heaven would be a better place, but they just flippantly say, well, you're grieving, you've lost, you're never going to see this loved one again. Well, don't worry about it. You know, they're up in heaven now, so it'll be, they can sometimes relate in a flippant way, but they can a lot of times relate in ways that make you laugh, that make you just kind of love being in the moment with them. But they can turn you off too by sometimes relating to you, just kind of brushing you off and not taking you when you're trying to pour your heart out to them. Mm-hmm. They can just kind of flip it off.
I would say that I personalities are one of the easiest and almost most enjoyable personality styles to relate to, because like you said, they are easygoing. They have this easy energy about them. They're very oftentimes dynamic, charismatic. But another thing that I have figured out about the I personality, that I think in one way it's one of their best qualities, and in another way, taken to an extreme, like we say, can become a dark side of their personality. And that is that oftentimes they operate in this sort of out of sight, out of mind mentality. And it helps them to live in the moment. So the people that they're relating to in the moment, they are great when they're relating to them, when they're interacting with them. But especially sometimes if you're a friend or in a relationship with an I personality, if you're not in that moment with them, sometimes you can left feeling hurt or forgotten by them, because they're so in the moment that if you're not in their moment with them, then again, you left very much feeling out of sight, out of mind. And as I was thinking about this, thinking about some of the ways it's difficult for each personality style to relate how they come across to people, I was thinking about that example in my own life of one of my best friends that I grew up with. She's an I personality. She is one of my friends that I can have the deepest conversations with, but also laugh the hardest with. And one of the things that I struggled with as a C personality was C personalities oftentimes have very high expectations of other people. And that is one of the ways that they almost hurt themselves when they're relating to other people, is that they set very high, almost idealistic expectations. And that's something valuable for, say, a C personality, or really any personality, to remember when they're relating with other people, and say with an I personality, to take their strengths as something that is valuable, not as something that frustrates them. So if you have an I personality friend who you felt the after effects of that out of sight, out of mind mentality, be able to see it as one of their strengths, as something that you get to enjoy in the moment with them, and maybe check some of your expectations and how you perceive and relate to other people, and see what their strengths are when you relate to them, and give grace for yourself and for them in some of the weaknesses that they might have, or some of the weaknesses you have in the expectations that you set for other people.
What about the S personality? How do they relate to other people, and how do other people relate to them?
I would say that they're another personality that's very easy to relate to. They have this very calm, easygoing demeanor about them that I think makes interacting and relating with them very comfortable. It's just very easy and relaxing to be around the S personalities. But what would you say are some of the difficulties when it comes to relating to an S?
I think sometimes they just don't get to the point. I think that they can just keep going in circles at times, and they sometimes have a hard time getting out the words because they just keep circling. And if you're not walking in the Spirit, you can get really frustrated with them. And so I would say that's one of the biggest ways is in relating to them and how they relate is that at times they don't get to the point and they are always wanting to make sure nobody's going to get offended. And so oftentimes everybody gets offended because they're so consumed with relating that nobody gets offended.
And I think especially there's different reasons and different ways each personality would be frustrated by that with, say, an S personality. But really with any of the personalities, we all are different in our own way. And you mentioned walking in step with the Spirit. One of the fruits of the Spirit that I think is so important to put on and embrace and remember when relating to other people is to have patience with one another amidst our differences. With an S personality, it might be patience in their slowness to change and their slowness to maybe be drawn out of their shell or get to the point. And with an I personality, it might be patience in them being so in the moment and being so fast-paced. A C personality, there's all these different ways that we need to have patience with other people and the way that they are different from us. But as we wrap up, we still haven't touched on the C personality. How would you say a C personality tends to relate with other people?
Very cautiously. It oftentimes they can be like evaluating you, and you can see them evaluating you because they're sitting there. I won't say the word judging, but what's their motive? Because they're very analytical. I'd like to do something as we do wrap up. We had so many more notes in here today, but I want people as they begin to learn about personalities to go back to Scripture. And I felt like we had some really good biblical examples. So let's just connect the biblical examples for the D, and we could see areas that they related well and then didn't relate well. But Paul was the D personality. We came up with an example of Pharaoh being a D personality, and obviously he didn't do so well in how he related, right? Then we did the I, and I think that we had David as an I personality. Did we have another person listed, or was it
King
just
Saul?
King Saul? Yeah, again, strengths of the way he related and sometimes envious when he wasn't the center of attention, right? And then we did the S. We had Abraham, and we had Barnabas. Did we have Barnabas in our notes? But I know we had Abraham, and sometimes how he compromised, even as he did with King Abimelech, I think it was. And then we had the C personality, and we had Jonah and how he related. And so it's really just interesting when you start studying people in the Bible and how they related to God, but also related to other people. So I just wanted to get that in, even though we didn't get a lot of unpacked about these biblical characters. So.
And while we didn't get to unpack it in this conversation, because we're trying not to make this too long of a conversation for folks, if you do get our book, in the chapter on how you relate to other people, we really unpacked those biblical examples. It's one of my favorite chapters because of how you see, how you reflect how other people in Scripture, how you mirror them in certain ways, how you relate to others, how you relate to yourself, and how you relate with God. So if you want more on biblical examples, go check out this chapter. But as we wrap up again, what do you think are some of the ways it's difficult to relate to a C personality style?
To a C personality style, I think if you're not a C personality style, to be slow, to be methodical, to allow them to ask questions and not get frustrated, And like, are you challenging me? Because C's will ask questions and they'll seem as if they're challenging, and they're really not challenging. They're wanting to clarify. And I think not to get frustrated when they want to start going deeper and again asking for clarification on whatever you're speaking to them about.
That's a great point. And even as I'm listening to you with that, the thing that I keep remembering and that I keep coming back to in my mind is that understanding people, relating to them, connecting with who they are. First of all, you have to know who you are and how you naturally relate, how you come across to people, how you perceive yourself, but also how other people perceive you. And relating to other people is also just about meeting people where they are. And I think Jesus did that so well in his ministry. He met people exactly where they are. Obviously, he knew who they are better than we know. But another way to do that, and another thing we talk about in the book, is just by walking in step with the Spirit, because the Spirit can give you and help you with that patience that we talked about. It can help you to be kind and gentle in the way that you interact with other people, to have self-control in who you are, to put on love and humility and gentleness. It talks about that in Colossians 3. And so as we think about relating to other people, how can we best relate in the way that Christ did, is by walking in step with the Spirit, by making sure we're embracing the character of Christ that is found in the fruits of the Spirit, that is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So as you think about how your personality relates to other people, just remember that the most important thing is that you are in step with the Spirit, because he will give you the wisdom and discernment in how you can best relate with those around you. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like, subscribe, share with some of your friends. Make sure that you stay tuned for next week's episode, where we will talk more about how your personality affects your leadership style. If you're interested in getting our new book, The Dark Sides of Personality and How to Overcome Them, it is available on Amazon and on our website at placeministries.org. And once again, thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.